Good morning and welcome to my latest video on metaethics. This is for AQA specification 7171 and 7172, so the philosophy specification. As ever, I'm pains to say that this is a revision video. It's not meant to be a comprehensive overview of this particular topic, so please make sure that you have gone back and looked at your notes, etc. Now, I should say that as I'm recording this, I'm doing so at a fairly strange time in our history, something that we've never encountered before, which is, the sort of almost a total shutdown of society as a result of the coronavirus. Hopefully, if you're watching this in future, that's past and everything's gone back to normal. If you're watching this at the present time, then I hope that the video helps you with some of the stuff that you will be needing to study over the next few months and whilst you're not in school. One of the things I always say to my students is have a little look as philosophers at how you can apply the theory to everyday society. So when it comes to metaethics and ethical questions, have a look at, for example, the way that people have been hoarding food and whether you think that's right or wrong, and what different ethical theories would say about things like that. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to say is that medical ethical theories are quite confusing. And they're quite confusing because there's a lot to look at, and there's a few key terms there which you're maybe not familiar with, and you're going to have to get your head around those. So looking back at your notes, looking at doing some additional reading will certainly help on this topic. When it comes to metaethical theories, what we're going to do is look at moral judgments, and typical example of that is saying that murder is wrong, and we're going to ask what that means and whether it's true or false. Now, there are two real sort of theories behind this. There's moral realism, which claims that moral judgments are mind independent and are external facts, and then there's moral anti-realism, which says that mind independent moral facts and judgments don't exist. The second thing I should say is that these theories can then be subdivided into two further aspects: cognitivism and non-cognitivism. Now, again, my students found that concept a little bit difficult, so you might have to kind of make some notes, put a poster up on the wall so that you can get your heads around it. So you can see on the table that we've got moral realism and moral anti-realism, and then we've got cognitivism, which basically are statements which can be true or false. So in moral realism, we see philosophers, or two philosophical theories, naturalism and non-naturalism in terms of moral realism, and then error theory in moral anti-realism. I'll talk about that at a later stage. In non-cognitivism, we've got the idea that moral statements aren't capable of being true or false, and you've got emotivism and prescriptivism. Again, I'll go over those. So the two that we're going to focus on today are going to be naturalism and non-naturalism. Now, in terms of realist theories, basically realist theories argue that moral judgments are mind independent and they are factual. So when you say that murder is wrong, you are making a statement which is factually true. However, there is some dispute about what these moral facts look like. It's not to say that they're arguing whether they're factually true. It's just saying that they dispute what they are. So on the one hand, you've got ethical naturalism, and ethical naturalism claims that moral properties are also natural properties. And on the other hand, you've got ethical non-naturalism, which basically claims that moral properties are non-natural properties. Difficult to say that. But they are both cognitivist theories. In other words, they are saying that whatever position you hold, whether it's an ethical naturalist or ethical non-naturalist, that you can make moral judgments which are both true or false. Okay, so the first one we'll look at is ethical naturalism. Ethical naturalism is fairly basic. It basically argues that moral properties can be reduced to natural properties and are mind independent. In other words, moral properties exist somewhere out there in the world. Now you can see the people who think about that being correct are utilitarians. And basically, utilitarians, as you will undoubtedly know, argue that pleasure is a good thing and pain is a bad thing. Now, their argument is that pleasure and pain are natural properties of the brain, and therefore they are a ethical naturalist philosophy. However, I should make the distinction that the brain and the mind are not the same thing. Don't get that confused. You'll do that in metaphysics of the mind, but it's easy to get confused that the brain and mind are one and the same, and people will argue that they are not. Okay, on the other hand, you've got ethical non-naturalists. And ethical non-naturalists claim that moral judgments are realist properties but are non-natural. So when we say that murder is wrong, it refers to a non-natural property, but it's still either true or false. Now, one of the key people in the theories, in this theory, is a guy called G.E. Moore, who wrote a philosophical book, Principia Ethica. I think it was around 1903 it was published, and he describes something called the naturalist fallacy. He basically says there's a tendency to describe moral properties as if they are natural properties. So, someone might say murder is wrong. It's natural to feel that way. His argument is that it isn't. It doesn't make sense. Okay, so according to G. Moore, moral properties may very much look like natural properties, but they aren't the same thing. And he goes on to explain that. He basically says that concepts like pleasure are not the same as being good in the way that utilitarians think. So utilitarians say that, pleasure is a good thing. And Moore points out that there seems to be no point in asking, is pleasure good, if you believe that pleasure is actually good. He says that the only point of asking the question is if pleasure and good are two different concepts. Because if you believe that pleasure is good, you might as well be asking a very closed question, is pleasure pleasure? And that doesn't make any sense. So G. Moore proposes something known as the open question argument. Now, in terms of his own theoretical proposal in regard to this, he puts forward a moral theory called intuitionism. Can't say it, so intuitionism. There you are. And he basically argues that by using our intuition, we can make judgments using our rationality. So when we say that murder is wrong, we believe that intuitively and because it's a rational judgment, but it doesn't have to be a natural property. Now, as I say, some of this is going to be quite confusing. You're going to have to get your head around it. You might even have to listen to my voice a couple of times, unfortunately. But I hope this video is somewhat helpful, and the next video will be looking at anti-realist theories.